Welcome to Listen, Love, Connect. I'm Savannah Paul Fox, your host, and today's guest is Sumari Fubara. Due to current events, we will be talking about Ukraine and Russia from a mental health standpoint. Let's head over to Somi and get started.
Exceptional Heroes brings you Listen, Love, Connect. So today we are talking about trauma during war times due to the current events happening with Ukraine and Russia. Given this topic, Somi, what are some key things that we should be looking out for given the war in Ukraine and in other parts of the world, since there are so many wars going on?
Absolutely. So again, just a really important topic to be having right now because there's so many wars happening and a lot of us are not aware of even the other wars that are happening. But one of the major things that I think goes unnoticed is the trauma of displacement. And that essentially means that, for people that are in war-torn areas or just in areas of whether terrorism or just anything that is their physical safety is being jeopardized, is that in a blink of an eye, without any preparation, they have to pack up. Sometimes they don't even have time to pack up and they have to flee. They have to go somewhere else. So that element of displacement becomes extremely traumatic depending on the individual and the experience, because especially if you had ties to your home, you have connections there, to just up and have to leave by force, right, majority of the time is something that a lot of people struggle with. So as we look at the Ukrainian situation right now, and we're focusing on this because it's the one talked about more in the media right now. However, Palestinians and the Israelites are in a war situation, have been for years, and you end up having a lot of people fleeing. So the concept of being a refugee is a traumatic situation because a refugee indicates that you had to leave your home for whatever reason, most of the time because your life, your physical safety was in danger, and you had to find refuge in some other place or country to start to rebuild or even start feeling safe. I think as of today, the amount of people, Ukrainians that have fled Ukraine due to this war is about 3 million people. Wow. So just even putting that into perspective, there are 3 million people, and that includes the elderly, children, women, men, all walks of life, pregnant women. There's so much happening right now where they just, in a blink of an eye, they had to pack up, take what they could, and flee to a different country of which a lot of times they don't know anybody there. They don't know how they're going to restart. Some of them are separated from family members. So displacement is a huge, huge, huge thing when you're talking about war and the effects of trauma.
And we talk a lot on camera and off camera about physical safety and mental safety, and you're basically taking one or both of that away from them.
Right. I don't know of any person, and I have worked with some that have been in war-torn areas, that both their physical and emotional safety isn't jeopardized or just stripped. Most of the time, if your physical safety is stripped or jeopardized, it's almost always that your emotional safety is going to be in jeopardy as well. I've never seen it, Now there are times where your physical safety is, you're good, but
Yeah.
emotionally, your emotional safety is in jeopardy. However, I've never seen it where physical has been removed and emotional is intact.
That makes sense. So given emotional safety, physical safety, displacement kind of go together, would you say? Separation, I feel like, is a big one because I just recently saw on the news, and I don't watch a lot of news, but I felt like it was important to watch it with this. And there's been so many people who have been torn away from their families, losing their wives, their kids. It's just really sad with all the separation that's going on.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another huge thing that people take for granted. Separation can be very traumatic, especially when you have a strong attachment. So I will even take this from a childlike perspective for the children.
Yeah.
Children that are separate, displaced first, and then find themselves separated from their parents or their primary caregivers, that becomes a very traumatic situation for them. Because here, their safety, their attachment has now been removed. So I look at it as like a lot of children have safety blankets that they carry around with them. They call it blankies, binkies, or whatever they call it. A lot of times for some children, their primary caregivers or their family members are their safety blankets. So here within a war, situation of war, that blanket is just abruptly taken away.
Yeah.
And it completely dysregulates a child, and it causes them to question a lot of things. It causes them to, a lot of times, develop mental health issues, whether depression, anxiety. It causes them to try to regain that attachment. And at times, because their brain is still developing, they may attach to things that are not necessarily healthy for them, but just to kind of help with the pain, whether to numb the pain or to ease the pain.
And what would be some unhealthy attachments?
So it could be an individual that doesn't really have the best interest at heart. This is where you find a lot of children that get abused. And it's not just children, you know, young adults too can find themselves in the same situation. So that's where you see, you know, a lot of abuse. A lot of children then end up growing up, you know, needing to experiment or just needing, like I said, to medicate, to find something to help them. So, you know, whether it's, and sometimes we are the catalyst for why they find other things. So for instance, you know, nowadays, I've said this for years, over 15 years, trauma, there is no medication for trauma.
Right.
Zero, zilch. Any individual that tells you that you can take something and it'll help you, what they're doing is treating symptoms.
Right.
And the symptoms do not get to the root of the problem, which is your trauma. So you have a child that has been in a war-torn situation and is now experiencing depression or anxiety or whatever the case may be. They go to see some psychiatrist or whatever, or even just their primary care physician if they have medical providers in that area. And they're giving medication because the child is unable to sleep, and maybe they're bedwetting, and maybe this, and there's so many different things happening. So they're like, oh, yep, diagnosis of depression or diagnosis of anxiety, or sometimes they even diagnose the PTSD, but then it's medicated. So then you give them medication, and then it becomes a dependency on that. And when that doesn't do it anymore, and then they get older, they look for other things to help with that. Because again, what our society tends to do is say, don't feel. Avoid, don't feel.
Man up.
And so, with that messaging, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to avoid and I'm not going to feel. And this helps me not to feel. And it's not even just like pain meds are on the increase. So what we're seeing now is a lot of people have chronic pain, and the chronic pain is attached to a lot of trauma history.
Yeah.
But because it's being misdiagnosed and we're not taking the time, because trauma treatment takes time. It's not a quick fix. So because we're not taking the time to decipher or really listen to people and say, oh, is it possible, or can we rule out that this person is not experiencing this chronic pain because of their trauma? So then we prescribe pain meds. And I don't know how many people, I can't recall, there's just so many people I know that have prescribed pain meds for something that is said to be chronic pain, but it's attached to their trauma. But then they get dependent on that pain medication, and then it becomes, the way to numb, the trauma. So that's another huge thing, and then we see it all the time. Hence the reasons why we have a lot of orphanages or foster care systems or whatever the case may be, because especially when there's war and there's a separation, and maybe the child is in Poland and the mother is in, I don't know, another European country, and there's no tracking system, there's no way to figure out, like, okay, how do we get this child back to their parents? We saw something similar with the children of the border that were separated from their parents, and the whole thing was like, oh, they were coming in here illegally, but they were seeking refuge from a very destabilizing situation. But in that moment, unfortunately, our government was the one doing this.
Yeah.
We took children from their parents. So they were with their parents. And we said, no, you go here. And so they just took a bunch of children and they put them really in a makeshift prison, where they, and I mean, children as young as 6 months. Yeah. And so the effects of that, being stripped from your attachment on your safety, is very traumatic and can really, really cause a lot of mental health issues down the road.
With all of this going on, there's going to be a lot of like a domino effect of their mental health in the future. Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely. So I often tell people that trauma is about what happened and how it's experienced by that person, and the story or the memories that continue because of what happened and their experience. So when you witness, so for right now, just like you, I don't remember the last time I watched news. It's been that long. A long time ago, a lot of people were like, well, during COVID, I stopped watching news. I think I stopped watching news maybe 7 years ago. If I can remember correctly, it was around the time Morrow was born, or before then, that I just was like, I'm done. Because I often say that our diet isn't just what we eat, it's what we take in as well, what we're watching, what we're listening to. And so that was very important to me, especially while I was pregnant. For those of us that are going through the social media feeds, or watching the news, or reading the newspapers, or hearing the stuff, we are witnesses to this traumatic event. And depending on where you are in your healing journey, you can get triggered. Now, this is something you and I talked about, years ago, that any trauma survivor has to be very intentional as to what they take in, because you don't, and has to be fully aware of what their triggers are, because you don't know when you're going to be triggered. And then you also have to have a safety plan for in the event that you get triggered. So here we are, a whole bunch of us are witnessing this event. and
Mhm.
people are being triggered out the wazoo, especially those that have experienced war-torn situations before. So you have the people actively experiencing it. That's going to be completely clear that they are going to need trauma treatment. And that's one of the things that kind of, it's difficult for me because I see these things happening and I know the need, but I know the need is not going to be met.
Mhm.
So even with COVID, and we had this conversation last time, the moment COVID hit, I immediately said, we have to have a plan in place to help with the trauma of everything that's going to happen as a result of this pandemic.
Mhm.
And now there's so much of a demand for trauma, culturally competent, trauma-informed therapists.
Yeah.
But you can't find them.
There's not enough of you.
There's not enough. And I mean, even last week, I had 3 phone calls
Mhm.
of people saying, hey, I'm looking for a trauma-informed, culturally competent therapist. I can't find them in my area. You, like 3 years ago, that was you. It was like, we can't find one. So I look at the Ukrainian situation. I look at the stuff in Israel and Palestine. I look at a lot of stuff going on in Africa. There's so many wars and stuff going around. And the one thing I keep saying to myself is, why do we disregard mental health so much? Now, granted, we have made strides. I don't want to disregard the fact that we've made strides. However, I'm like, we need more.
Mhm.
But I don't say, for me, it's not just any kind of therapist. We need trauma-informed therapists. And that process requires the therapist to do their work.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. So you have those experiencing it that are not getting the trauma treatment that they need.
Mhm.
You have those that had experienced it years before that are now being re-traumatized. And then you have a new wave of people that were never in war-torn areas, but had trauma from something different, but an image or this. You have the other day, there was a pregnant woman that was running down some stairs because I guess the maternity ward in Ukraine was destroyed. And I just immediately thought, I was like, if there's a woman, maybe in the US, maybe in Africa, maybe anywhere, that had to flee or had any kind of danger while she was pregnant, seeing that image would trigger her. Or trigger her if she hasn't done the work. So even those, my concern is that we have normalized trauma. It's become this buzzword that everyone's like, oh, trauma, 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 and healing, 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 and it's the new thing to do. But a lot of people haven't taken the time to fully understand what it is and how it shows up and the process of healing and how we are contributors to re-traumatizing people and even ourselves. So that is a big and huge concern for me for the future, is that you will have Ukrainian children and because it's not just Ukrainians fleeing from Ukraine, it's anybody that was in Ukraine. You have Africans that are experiencing not racial trauma in addition to the trauma of war. And you have these children, and they're going to be older at some point in time. Then you have our children here in the US that are in the know about some of these things, especially if they're on social media or whatever so they know these things. And they start getting afraid, like, whoa, what if this happens to me? And that elicits anxiety, and because it's a lot of overthinking and worrying and catastrophic mindset. So even though they have never experienced any war and their lives are not in danger, that could trigger a mental health issue, especially here in New York. You have a lot of children that witnessed and experienced 9/11.
Yeah.
Every year we are reminded about it.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that kind of concern me from a mental health standpoint, is how we are not informed, we're not properly informed to meet the need, and properly informed to ensure that the healing isn't surface, but it gets to the root of the problem.
And I'm going to be posting links on the bottom for resources, but is there anything that you recommend for people in the Ukraine here, what they can do for their mental health? I know it can be very difficult as some people are still running from their homes, but do you have any advice?
So definitely from the Ukrainian standpoint, or any other war-torn areas, I always call it the 3 pillars of trauma treatment or trauma healing. The first is, if you are not physically safe, that's paramount.
Yeah.
Like physical safety and basic needs have to be met. You can't ask somebody that hasn't eaten in 3 days and is literally running for their life to focus on their mental health and their healing, because their body is like, I need food, I need nourishment, and their body is also saying, I need safety. So that's the first thing. Wherever we are, whether here in America, wherever you are in these war-torn areas, we that are in a better position have to advocate and make sure that these people are safe, and their basic needs of shelter and food and water and clean clothes and medical care are met, because some of these people are getting hurt.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get hurt during this time, whether it's, inhaling, all the fumes and, chemicals from, these things, bombs and everything being thrown, to physically being hurt. Like they're running and they trip and they really injure themselves, or something hits them. So that's the first thing. Emotional safety is the next part. I feel like, like I said, the emotional and physical safety are kind of the first thing. So then you have to make sure that they are emotionally safe. One of the things that I feel that we don't do very well with, and I've even seen this with therapists, we are uncomfortable with discomfort. I'm going to say that again. We are uncomfortable with discomfort. So somebody is crying and wailing because we are uncomfortable with discomfort. What is the thing we want to do quickly? We want them to shift. We want them to stop crying. We want it to be all done, because sometimes it triggers us and makes us uncomfortable, and we're trying to shift the discomfort. You cannot help people and give people space, an emotionally safe space to be, if you are uncomfortable with their discomfort. So that's another key thing, is for people that are going to be helping around the world, or even here in the United States, whatever the case may be, again, being trauma informed, that when someone comes to you and is telling you their story and they're just beside themselves, or even if they're stoic or whatever it is, that you don't jump in to save them. That's not what you're there for. You're there to be there. Whatever it may be, whatever they may be feeling, you have to be able to be like, okay. And this is a completely different scenario, but I'll give an example. When I work with children, one of the things they always tell me is, my mom or dad always tells me, okay, stop crying. That in their mind registers to them as like, it's not the safe space to let my emotions out. So in this situation is giving people space to talk about. I don't care if they're talking about it 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they need in this moment. And as you are comfortable with being there with them, they get comfortable with releasing it and letting it go and moving on, if that's what needs to happen in that moment. So that's the other thing I would say is self-regulation or co-regulation. Here in the United States, if we are being triggered by all the images or whatever the case may be, finding whatever helps you to regulate. Interesting, over the weekend, I was doing a session, and one of the things that I brought to mind is cold exposure and grounding techniques. So a lot of times when we're dysregulated, it's really our body trying to awaken us and alert us to, okay, something is off. And triggers are always about the past. It's the past event showing up in the present moment. And if you don't properly take care of it in the present moment, it's going to hijack the future.
Yes.
So what I often suggest is whether it's music that grounds you, if you need to go outside, I'm a big proponent of walking barefoot. Like here in New York, there are plethora of parks. Now, I mean, and I'm glad they section out where dogs can be and where, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to step on dog poop or whatever the case may be. Take off your shoes, walk on the ground, feel the earth on your feet. It's actually very grounding. Cold water, putting your hand on the cold water, or splashing cold water on your face, or taking a cold shower, all of that awakens and brings the body into the present so that you can be more aware and mindful of what is going on with you. So whatever the grounding or way to self-regulate, maybe just laying in someone's arms that you're a loved one, or touch, whatever it is, that's going to be very important for people to activate. And then the last thing is we have to collectively find a way to empower each other, because a lot of times what happens, whether it's trauma in war-torn areas or just trauma period, it's a sense of hopelessness, a sense of powerlessness.
Yeah.
So you just feel so disempowered. So when I think about all the millions of refugees all over this world that had to flee from an area that they, was no longer safe for them, or a war-torn area.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how disempowering that is.
Yeah.
You didn't have a voice to say and speak up like, this is hurting me. No, I don't want to leave my home. You had no choice. That was silence. And in some places like, in Russia or wherever, and in places where, the governments are really more strict,
Yes.
your voice is completely silent. If you speak up, it could cost you your life.
Yeah.
So even for those, people that are in areas where there is no war, but they just don't feel like they can speak up regarding the situation because of fear for their lives, this element of empowering people and empowering ourselves and finding a way to gain our voice back is so crucial.
Yes, and you brought up so many great points. I feel like it helps in a way to speak about it from a mental health standpoint and not just by the news, if that makes sense, because it is such a crucial topic. I didn't even know that there was other wars going around because I don't read the news, but yeah, I just feel like this was a great topic. Again, I'll put resources down below. And I know this is also a heavy topic, so breathing is always with you, as Somi says, so you can breathe in 4, out 8, and thanks for watching.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. But wait, before you leave, visit and follow these Instagram accounts. Check out my website, exceptionalheroes.com, to learn more about my patent-pending therapeutic device and to buy some Exceptional Heroes merch. Always remember to listen, love, connect. Bye.